Tonight, major fallout after that near rebellion in Moscow, with mercenaries threatening to overthrow parts of Vladimir Putin's government. Those armed fighters now pulling out of the cities they'd taken inside Russia as our reporter gets inside Moscow, a city that was bracing for battle just hours ago. Tonight, new details on the chaos that almost brought the country to civil war and what it means for Putin's grip on power.
We've seen more cracks emerge in the Russian facade.
Tornadoes touching down in Indiana late today, with a deadly heat wave in Texas turning dangerous. One teenager now dead, with temperatures feeling like 120. Plus, how 12 people trying to cool down in this lazy river ended up in the hospital.
There's several children having trouble breathing.
The new investigation just announced by the Coast Guard into that doomed Titanic sub, and who they say will pay for everything. Dramatic body camera footage showing the moments before 3 San Antonio police officers killed a woman at her own home. The charges they now face. The race to stop a possible environmental disaster after part of this train dropped into the Yellowstone River.
This is NBC Nightly News with Kate Snow.
Good evening. I'm Hallie Jackson in for Kate Snow, and we begin tonight with the shock and the uncertainty now around the world after mercenary rebels called off their march on Moscow, ending the biggest threat to the Kremlin's power in decades. This just doesn't happen in Vladimir Putin's Russia, not lately. And while he's fended off an uprising for now, there are many questions about his grip on power and what it means for Putin's war in Ukraine. President Biden speaking late today with the Ukrainian president and huddling with his own top advisors as we learn new details about what the U.S. knew and when. World leaders are just beginning to sift through the fallout of this revolt, one that lasted only about 24 hours. But understanding its impact could take months. Our Keir Simmons has made his way to Russia and starts us off.
In Russia tonight, state television is not showing these stunning images. Russians cheering for the leader of this weekend's aborted rebellion and his soldiers as they leave the city of Rostov-on-Don. Their mutiny bringing the country to the brink of chaos less than 24 hours ago, when Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner Group, led a march to Moscow in response to what he called an attack on his fighters. Tanks and mercenary troops took to the streets, moving within 120 miles of the Russian capital. Before an unprecedented deal with President Putin, brokered by another president, Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko, apparently allowing the man behind the insurrection to go unpunished and into exile. All that's left behind in Rostov-on-Don, occupied by his fighters for less than a day, tank tracks and questions. How can one, in a situation where we are in conflict with another country, have an internal war as well, this man asks. It was unexpected and somehow incomprehensible, says this woman. Very stressful. Today, we're all recovering from the stress. It was the biggest challenge to Vladimir Putin's power in 23 years. The president called Prigozhin's rebellion a betrayal and a stab in the back.
What's so striking about it is it's internal. The fact that you have from within someone directly questioning Putin's authority. The very fact that over the weekend, Wagner forces were coming out of Ukraine and going into Russia and toward Moscow in and of itself is extraordinary.
NBC News has learned that U.S. intelligence agencies were aware that Prigozhin was planning a challenge to Russia's senior military leaders, briefing congressional leaders about it last week, according to a source familiar with the matter. Some Russian media tonight saying a senseless massacre was avoided with maturity, while the U.S. and Ukraine sensing weakness at the heart of the Kremlin.
Putin right now is in real trouble. His army, 1.4 million people in the security forces, didn't step in and really squash this rebellion. As we're talking, the Chinese, the Indians, the Brazilians, the Middle East are trying to reassess how likely is Putin to survive much longer.
At the very least, President Putin has more problems today than he did yesterday, with unknown consequences for his so-called special military operation in Ukraine. The more we hear the Russians have conflicts, this Ukrainian soldier says, the more it raises our fighting spirit. We didn't hear from President Putin or Yevgeny Prigozhin today, Hallie, and yet their next moves may determine Russia's future.
And Kira, at one point it seemed like Russia was on the brink of civil war. Instability can be a concern in any country, but especially so in this one, in Russia.
That's so right. You know, 24 hours ago, Hallie, I thought I might be standing here talking about Russians fighting Russians here on the streets of Moscow. And just think about this. Russia controls around half the world's nuclear warheads, and it was on the brink of chaos. Hallie?
Our Keir Simmons in Moscow for us tonight. Keir, thank you. Back here at home, that brutal, unrelenting heat wave in Texas has now turned deadly after a teenager died. The temperatures today felt like 120 degrees in some spots, while in the Midwest, we're tracking reports of tornadoes that hit late today. Priscilla Thompson reports from Houston.
That is a tornado. I am getting the out of here.
Tonight, there's a threat of a tornado outbreak, with one being spotted just south of Indianapolis. It comes with temperatures in the south hitting historic triple digits for the third week in a row. Some spots reaching more than a scorching 110 degrees. From Texas,
this year it feels hotter than regular.
To Louisiana.
We've got heat advisories as the heat has expanded all the way up to Memphis.
More than 40 million Americans are under heat alerts during an unrelenting heat wave that's now turning deadly. At Big Bend National Park, officials say a 14-year-old boy died after passing out while hiking in 119-degree heat. The boy's stepfather, racing to get help, was tragically killed in a car crash, according to the National Park Service. Both deaths are under investigation.
We have multiple patients.
And in Houston, a dozen people trying to cool off from the brutal heat were rushed to the hospital Saturday after getting sick at a lazy river pool from possible chlorine poisoning.
There's several children having trouble breathing and who ingested chlorine.
The facility declined to comment. Now, with more blistering heat on the way, the Texas power grid is being pushed to its limits. Its operator ERCOT issuing a weather watch all the way through Friday, bracing for record-breaking demand as people try to beat the heat any way they can.
Priscilla is joining us now from Houston. So, Priscilla, when are people there going to catch a break?
Hallie, not anytime soon. We're on track to see more than 80 temperature records shattered this week across the Southwest and Central Plains, with temperatures on track to reach more than 112 degrees. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, where folks are cooling off there in Houston. Priscilla, thank you. To Boston now, where the Coast Guard is revealing new details tonight about the investigation into that sub that imploded while exploring the Titanic. Jesse Kirsch has the latest.
Tonight, the U.S. Coast Guard says the Titan submersible search and rescue efforts are officially over. Now, the Coast Guard says it's convened a Marine Board of Investigation, working with international partners to figure out what went wrong, killing all 5 men on board Titan.
The board will first and primarily work to determine the cause of this marine casualty and the 5 associated deaths. And it can make recommendations to the proper authorities to pursue civil or criminal sanctions as necessary.
The military discussing the cost of its efforts, too.
The Coast Guard doesn't charge for search and rescue, nor do we associate a cost with human life. We always answer the call.
Tonight, OceanGate's spokesperson tells NBC News the company has, quote, no additional information to share at this time. Also new tonight, a closer look at the ongoing recovery operation. Pelagic Research Services sharing these photos of its remotely operated vehicle Odysseus from today's dive. The company calling the efforts remarkably difficult and risky, challenged by incredible atmospheric pressures, temperatures, and environmental stresses. Titan went missing last Sunday on its descent to the Titanic shipwreck. On Thursday, officials announced the discovery of submersible debris near Titanic's bow, saying the submersible's exploration appears to have ended in a catastrophic implosion. Now, investigators are looking into voice recordings from Titan's mothership, with the submersible's experimental design coming under growing scrutiny. Tonight, still no definitive answer on how adventure became tragedy. Jesse Kirsch, NBC News.
New body camera video from San Antonio shows the final moments before police shot and killed a woman in her own home. 3 officers now charged with murder. And a warning here. Some of the video you're about to see is disturbing. Dana Griffin has more.
3 San Antonio police officers have been charged with murder and suspended without pay after killing a woman armed with a hammer inside her own apartment.
Hey, lady, get over here.
Just after midnight Friday, officers were responding to a vandalism call.
Get over here.
46-year-old Melissa Perez was suspected of cutting wires to a fire alarm system. Police followed Perez to her first-floor apartment, where they say she locked herself inside. An officer removes the screen to her open window. Perez hits the officer with what appears to be a glass candle.
You're gonna get shot!
Shoot me! You ain't got no warrant!
Here's a wider angle of the confrontation.
You ain't got no warrant! Hey, what's up?
They say Perez then swung a hammer, shattering a window. Officers then fired the deadly shots. According to police, Perez was hit at least twice. Paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene.
It appeared that Ms. Perez was having a mental health crisis.
The police chief adding the officers' actions were not consistent with policy and training. Sergeant Alfred Flores and officers Eleazar Alejandro and Nathaniel Villalobos were suspended without pay and later arrested on murder charges. According to court documents, they have since been released on bond.
I'm just heartbroken. There's no words that can express the hurt that this has caused my family.
The police chief vowing to thoroughly investigate. Dana Griffin, NBC News.
Still ahead tonight, what is killing hundreds of animals off California's coast? To the West Coast now, and a mystery in the ocean. What is killing hundreds of dolphins and seals off the California coast? Experts now getting worried it could have an impact on the seafood we eat. Steve Patterson has more.
The beauty of a California beach day, broken by the startling sight of sickness and death.
It has been quite awful. We've been seeing at least 2 or 3 of them wash up every evening.
Scientists call it a microscopic menace, toxic algae blooms poisoning the California coast.
Toxins build up in their system and can lead to all sorts of issues.
Along the Southern California coast, officials estimate more than 1,000 calls for sea lions and dolphins, either dead or showing signs of sickness.
It affects the brains and the heart, can lead to seizures, can lead to disorientation, aggression, as well as miscarriages and death.
Biologists say it's likely a toxic algae bloom called pseudonychia, which can be eaten by small sea creatures, then turned into a neurotoxin when consumed by larger marine life. The Marine Mammal Care Center says there's been 50 rescues in the past 2 weeks alone.
And behind me, another dolphin washed up on shore. Researchers now taking measurements, collecting samples, and waiting for test results to find out if it really is this algae. And if it is, it's more than just wildlife at risk.
The California Department of Health warning against eating sport-harvested mussels, clams, or scallops from Santa Barbara County.
I've never seen anything like this. To my recollection, this is the largest pulse of animals that we've had, at least in the marine mammal response side.
Scientists scrambling for answers with wildlife rescue efforts around the clock. Steve Patterson, NBC News.
We're back in a moment with concerns something toxic may have ended up in the Yellowstone River after another train derailment. Plus, malls are getting creative to stay alive, like turning a Burlington coat factory into a pickleball court. We are back with new concerns about a possible toxic spill in the Yellowstone River after a train derailed and a bridge collapsed in Montana. Take a look. This train fell into the river Saturday, and while nobody was reported to be hurt, the company that operates it says certain cars carrying molten sulfur and asphalt have been compromised. It's still not clear how much, if any, hazardous material ended up in the water. With more big stores closing their doors or shutting down altogether, it's been a crisis for malls around the country. But some of them are getting big makeovers to stay open, meaning the malls of today look a lot different than the malls we grew up with. Brian Chung has a closer look.
It's a wild thought. Come to the Westfield Mall in Annapolis looking for shoes, and you might leave with a new feline friend or two.
They're bonded, so you need to take both of them.
It's a deal. It's a package deal.
That's right.
Kelly Brown helped open not a pet store, but an animal shelter at the mall during the pandemic. Since then, Paws at the Mall has found forever homes for some 1,600 rescue animals.
When you walk by, there might just be that one special animal that catches your eye. Hi, guinea pig.
The stores love it too. The shelter says foot traffic on this side of the mall has jumped 10% since they moved in. They're paying rents and filling empty space. The animal shelter here at the mall is what used to be a clothing brand Quicksilver location, and it's right across from what's now a library. It used to be a clothing brand store, Charlotte Russe, and an American Eagle. It's not a bookstore, but a public library. There's books for all ages, toys and play spaces for the kids too.
A lot of stores are closing, so I think having Anne Arundel County Public Library come in here has really revitalized this mall specifically.
Branch manager Rachel Myers says it goes both ways.
They're coming to the mall for so many other things, and they're becoming library users all the time, and that's really what we want, is creating more library customers. Nationwide, about 1/10 of mall space is currently empty, so they're turning to unconventional solutions. The future could look like Main Street, but inside, says expert Alexandra Lang.
You're going to see a lot more entertainment businesses like movie theaters, VR theaters, trampoline parks, maybe pickleball, climbing walls, other active uses.
It's happening already. In New Jersey, a Burlington coat factory is now a pickleball court. And in Idaho, the old Sears department store is now a charter school. The auto shop turned into a basketball court. All of it seamlessly embedded inside the Grand Teton Mall.
I think really the way to think about the mall of the future is what things make people leave their houses.
Brown says she's fielding calls from other shelters around the country. They want to try the mall too.
It's a win for the mall, it's a win for us, and especially for the animals.
An adorable solution that anyone could get behind. Brian Chung, NBC News, Annapolis.
When we come back, there's good news tonight about why a couple of doctors walked this bride down the aisle and the love story that almost didn't happen. There is good news tonight about second chances and the love surrounding one woman through the fight of her life. A short walk down the aisle for Sherry Shaw James.
I knew that you could be the man that could be my best friend.
But a long road to get there after being diagnosed with stage 3 squamous cell cancer in 2021. She got the news only about a year after she and Bill James started dating, never expecting he'd stick by her side.
But he didn't leave. Nope. He came with me to Houston, took me every day to MD Anderson.
Early.
And it started to turn to love.
Yeah, it blossomed into love.
Love that carried the couple through grueling round after round of chemotherapy and radiation until finally,
I'm cancer-free.
After an instant yes when Bill proposed, the two married earlier this month in North Carolina with some of the most special guests, not in the audience, but by Sherry's side.
You had a wedding. And you had some special people walk you down the aisle.
Dr. Morris and Dr. Holliday always tell me at my checkups, we do what we do because we give people another life. I wouldn't have even been around to marry him if not for them.
Doctors Van Morris and Emma Holliday from MD Anderson Cancer Center treated Sherry as she battled her cancer, seeing firsthand her fighting spirit and her blossoming relationship with Bill.
You get invited to this wedding. That must have been a moment for you.
To be a part of that just means so much more beyond just the doctor-patient relationship that we get to experience just in the walls of a hospital or clinic.
It was such a joy and a celebration of everything life after cancer should be.
Hand in hand, step by step, they gave her away after giving her a second chance at life.
And just to be like the firsthand witness right next to that, I think was incredible.
This is the day the Lord has made.
4 lives forever connected through the miracle of medicine and the power of love.
In the ceremony, when the pastor said, "Who gives this woman?" they both said, "We do." And they truly did, because they gave me life to allow me to marry Bill.
A lot of happy tears at that wedding. Sherry's still getting checkups and hopes to stay cancer-free as she starts her new life with Bill. That's NBC Nightly News for this Sunday. I'm Hallie Jackson. For all of us here at NBC News, good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.